another episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. And honestly, we just jumped into it because I have Gicela Holguin with me. Hola, Gisela.
Hola, Jessica.
And we were actually supposed to record a couple of weeks ago. And a couple of weeks ago, the fires happened in LA. They're still going. Like, thankfully, it's not as like they're finally starting to be handled, but the new ones pop up. There's been some here in San Diego, but I was legit not in a place to have a back and forth conversation to talk about, like, to be in this place. And Gisela graciously was like, totally get it. Do you want to hop on and just have a conversation that doesn't have to? And I'm so glad we did that, Gisela. Thank you for that. I want to just publicly acknowledge you for doing that with me, because I did feel better at the end, but it was just, yeah, it was rough.
It's rough being human right now, and I think we need to offer each other a lot of grace. And I'm glad that I could just be there and support you and hold space for, you and what you were feeling, and just to kind of allow the feelings to come through. So I'm also really grateful that I was able to support you in this way. And even though
Oh,
we just met, so that was really nice too. I mean, you know.
right. It was nice to just have a conversation, get to know each other a little bit. A lot of times we just jump in, right? And I know people do things different ways. Some people have like a 15-minute like pre-interview thing. I just go by like the form that I think the form is pretty like it it asks for a lot of information just to really get to a sense of who you are, and social and website. And I always feel like I can get a sense of a person by that. So that's just how I do it. Let
I
me
like
go over Gisela's bio and we will get into the wine and then get into the chisme. Gisela is a Latina speaker who transforms businesses and lives through the power of story. As an explorer of life and business alchemist, she guides audiences to see the profound connections between their inner world and their business success. Her mission is to empower, inspire, and equip individuals to build purpose driven, soul aligned businesses. Through her talks, she shares not just strategies of transformation, but stories, of transformation, healing, and growth. And you are actually in Canada,
yeah.
recently moved back. You're in Ontario, Canada, from Colombia.
Yeah.
How are you adjusting to life in
Back in the
Canada
cold.
for back in the cold?
Well, to be honest, like it's been rough, but I find that my mindset comparison to how it used to be when I used to live in Toronto full time has evolved as well. So I'm making the best of like seeing the winter in nature as a winter that's very much necessary in my life right now. So I'm kind of really liking this hibernation mode that it's bringing, this cold winter. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm taking it a lot better than I expected. Definitely a huge adjustment for my body. Dry lips, dry skin, like heat, like the furnaces everywhere. It's not a vibe, but I'm managing.
Yeah. So let me tell you, because I always get, and I'm not somebody who, um, I don't lick my lips, but I do tend to get dry lips. And I drink a ton of water because I've always heard it. But I'm like, that's mostly what I drink besides wine, which we'll get into in a sec. But that's mostly what I drink. Then I saw on TikTok, right, that this girl was saying her mom always puts hyaluronic acid on her lips, lets it dry, and then puts some like a really good lip moisturizer or whatever, really good something. And I started doing that, and I have seen such a huge difference
Really?
in my lips in regards to the dryness. So if you suffer, I'm going to suggest that to you too, Gisela. But I mean, I got like the ordinary, right? Like one of the ordinary brand, it's called the ordinary.
Yeah.
And it's like for for a bottle, it's like $9, at least here in the States. I don't know if it's different in Canada. I would imagine it'd be pretty similar, but it's
Hmm.
like a bottle for $9. And um and if you're only using that for, if you want to get like a higher one or whatever for, but if that's what you're using, you could use that just for your lips, and it will like it. I've seen a huge transformation in how my
I
lips
love
are
that.
dry. Yeah.
Definitely
So
gonna try.
yeah, let me know. Let me know. But before
Definitely
we
gonna
get
try.
into the chisme, we always start with the wine. So let me know if you're drinking wine. If you're not drinking wine, what are you drinking? And what do you normally like when you decide to drink a cocktail? Is it a cocktail? Is it a beer? Is it wine? Like, I want to know. Give me all the chisme. Let's start there.
Yes, yes, love it, love it, love it. So I right now I'm not drinking wine. I'm drinking mate. So I don't know if you guys know what mate is, but
Like
it's
yerba
like
mate?
yerba mate.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So I'm Colombian, but growing up in Canada, you mix with a lot of different cultures. And so I had a lot of Argentinian, Uruguayan influence in my life, either through friendships, relationships. And so this has been one of the things that I've kind of adopted culturally and I really love. So yeah, this is what I'm drinking. It's like my coffee, my everyday drink.
So today I am drinking.
What are
Shocker.
you drinking?
I so we have so many amazing Latina owned wineries that we partner with, that we talk about, whatever. And so today I've actually met up with Bob of, he's one of the owners of Vinos Unidos, and he was in San Diego, and we were gonna have lunch and we didn't get a chance to go have lunch, but he dropped some wine, a couple bottles
Mm-hmm.
of wine, and one of them I had not tried. And this is a 2022 Tempranillo called Triunfo, and it's from the St. Helena part of Napa Valley. And let's see if there you can there you can see the bottle.
Yeah, I like the name Vinos Unidos.
Yes. And they only did 75 cases of this.
Wow.
So in Tempranillo, what I love about Tempranillos is they're usually a little bit uh like spicy. They usually have a little
Mm.
bit of like a peppery. So we did have this other night, but now I'm like, but I didn't really go like smell it and everything. Mm. So when I smell it and then I like roll it and then I smell it again because it gets the oxygen in, and you can actually tell the difference in the smell. Oh yeah, I can definitely smell the pepper, like a little bit of peppery, a little bit of like green pepper too, like
I
the,
like that.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's so good. This is really good. I forgot to do my cheers, but still do. And actually, like my husband, he's not as big of a wine person. He likes wine. He enjoys wine. He's not as big of a wine person as me, but he is like, he really enjoyed this too. He was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so good." So I have to make sure I let Bob know. But Vinos Unidos, go to vinosunidos.com, and they actually have a tasting room in downtown Fullerton. So we have, two Latino wineries that have tasting rooms in Orange County. So we have Seis Soles in downtown Orange and Vinos Unidos in downtown Fullerton. So just so you guys know.
Love
Um,
that.
I know. Well, I'm glad. Look, you have, one of the things that I loved when I was reading your guest form was that you shared a poem that you wrote for yourself. Now,
Did I?
you did. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. Um, but I'm gonna start at the end of that. Okay, the
Okay.
very, very last line of that poem that you wrote is, "You are the light. Go on now and be the light so that others are ready and can find you." Like I said, we're going to go in reverse today. But what was that like? obviously you're Colombian, you're raised in you were you raised in Canada, right?
Yes, yes,
Then
yes.
you spent 4 years, right? Was it 4 years living?
Live,
See,
yeah.
I remember our conversation. I remember living in Colombia. You meet your husband there. Like, there's a lot, but growing up, did you feel like you were light, or did you feel like you were darkness to be able, or did you know to be able to eventually have a line like that in a poem you write to yourself?
To be honest, I thought I was always dark, darkness, darkness, darkness. You know, I thought I was kind of the black sheep since the moment I was born. I really have this, I think my earliest memory was always like standing out, but like for the wrong reason. You know what I mean? Like speaking out of line, using the wrong tone, speaking up against authority, not wanting to listen. And obviously, I was in Colombia till I was 7, so that's our most formative years. And I grew up in a very like um strict Colombian household where kids are seen, not heard. And so here I am, this like little girl, kind of calling adults out on shit that she's like, that doesn't look right. And it wasn't good for that family. Like they were like, who do you think you are? So I think that was a lot of my young adulthood life was like, why do I see so much darkness? Is something wrong with me? You know, is something wrong with me? But obviously, through my work and finally understanding that, I was born to be that disruptor in my family so that things could change, right? Obviously, I wish I knew that as I was going and growing through this instead of blaming myself so heavily, because you blame yourself. You're like, why am I so angry? A big reason why I studied even political science in university was because I thought I was going to work in immigration law because, I had a lot of trauma around my experience with my parents getting deported even from Canada at one point in our journey.
Really?
Yeah, so I've always been someone that has been extremely outspoken, but it's always been like against me because I never knew how to speak well in terms of like how to use that fire inside of me to not like it's like fire, right? It could warm up a meal or it could burn a house down. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And it's like it can be good or bad depending how
Which
you
is
use
not
it.
necessarily the best which
I know analogy, but like it's like that's how it felt. Like all honestly, like
like
it felt like you know things can be good or bad, and it depends the way you put it out in the world. And when I grew up thinking something was wrong with me, it felt like everything I put out was just for destruction. Like it was like
right.
I didn't know how to use that.
Do you
You know,
remember that movie Firestarter with Drew Barrymore? Did you ever watch that?
I don't think I've watched that one. No.
Okay, so her and her dad, it's like the mom dies, so it's just her and her dad, and they have like special powers. And the dad's is like if he concentrates really hard, he can make somebody do what he wants, but then his nose starts bleeding. And hers is she's called a fire starter. She can start fires with
Oh,
her mind,
wow.
just thinking it, and it can be used in a good way or a bad way. Um, and as a little kid, she has to learn, like, because she can instantly start these fires, she thinks she's bad.
Mm,
Um, and because there's destruction,
yeah.
in her path, so to speak. And no, not so to speak, literally in her path. She's just there, she causes destruction. Um, and in the end, like somebody she's, you know, thinks she can trust is trying to let her know how to control it, but really then she ends up realizing she can't trust him. But it's a good movie, you should watch it. You're just what you were sharing just reminded me of that movie in
Mm,
particular, about how we have, all of us have a destructive side to us, and but sometimes it's not necessarily destructive, it's to disrupt. And
totally.
you're right, it's not something that we can realize when we're young. It's not something that we even understand. I totally understand, get what you're saying, because I kind of feel like the same way. um And I think, and tell me if you felt the same way. I feel like you think that you're destructive because you've been told in some way or it may not be from your family, it might be from other influential sources around you, right? That you're just not good enough. And in my, like, was it that case for you that you just weren't feeling like you were good enough? So no matter what you did, even if it was a good thing, and somebody may have not necessarily been saying something was bad, but that's how you took it.
Definitely. I mean, I grew up with what we call, I don't know if you've read the book, emotionally adult children of emotionally immature parents. And I grew up with emotionally immature parents. And what that meant for me was that I thought that their emotional absence was because something was wrong with me. And so I grew up trying to prove and get their attention. So I would do anything to get their attention. Right. And so that
Good
behavior,
or bad.
good or bad, was rewarded. The bad behavior was rewarded with their attention. And so I learned that, being disruptive was also a way to get attention from my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there was a lot of things going on, especially growing up Latina, seeing parents I had really young parents who had me when they were 19, so they grew up with me. um I was their first child, so I was the firstborn, so I went through everything with them. So to
Yeah.
see that as a child, you kind of grow up faster too, because you're growing with them. And that forced me to kind of adapt to the bad habit of having to be disruptive in order to get their attention and get their love in some shape, way, or form. So yeah, in many ways, I felt that it gave me attention. In many ways, I felt that I wasn't good enough unless I got their attention, right? And I was always trying to prove like that I mattered in it, because unfortunately, when parents are emotionally absent or disassociated because they're also in survival mode, then we take it upon ourselves like it's our fault because we're children. But really, we
Yeah.
don't understand that it's just they can't give what they are not able to give to themselves, even. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's something that working, I've worked in the nonprofit world and the youth development world. And that's definitely something that we would see with the kids and how they would act out in school, right? Because that's the only way they would get attention. And it's it's so crazy when you're a kid, you don't think of that. Like I just want attention. And imagine if you could just say that, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
understood that, like I'm acting like this. I know I'm not a bad kid. I just want somebody to pay attention to me. But when you're that age, you don't think like that. Like how are you you don't even know that. You're just like, acting out, and that whether you're getting attention, whether it's for good or bad behavior, it feels good having somebody pay attention to you. That's all you know
Oh,
as a kid.
totally. That's all you know. That's all you know. And that's I think where parents who are aware of these things can look at their kids and be like, "Oh, my daughter's seeking attention," you know?
Mhm.
Therefore, if my parents were not in survival mode, they had the education and the understanding of what was going on for me, then they could have probably understood it more. But unfortunately, when you grow up with parents in survival mode, they're trying to put a meal on the table. They're trying to put a roof over your head. Like they don't have time to care about your emotions. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're like, I'm putting a roof over your head. What are you
At
crying
what point,
about?
right? Like, girl, you got food. You got a place to live, you got a place to sleep, you got food in your belly. Why are you complaining?
Exactly. Exactly.
How were you at school though? Were you just like do you feel like there was a difference in Gicela at school and Gicela at home? And what was that difference?
Oh, definitely. I mean, huge difference. At home, it's funny because for me, I suffered a lot of bullying in school, especially because I got here about in grade five. In grade five was when I came to Toronto, Canada, and I barely spoke English. I had an accent. I got heavy bullying. Sorry, my my
It's
dog wants to
okay.
join us.
Mine
No,
are here
the,
sleeping on the couch. So if they
um,
overhear something, I'll let you know.
so I was heavily bullied at school, and I was nerdy at school. I was very quiet. I was very like minding my own business, but at home I was a complete chaos mess. I would like fight with my sisters all the time. I was angry. I was disruptive. But at school, I was like, Gisella's great. She's quiet. She's nice. She's everything. And at home, I was like a complete opposite. So I feel like at school, I would be bullied, but at home, I would kind of be the bully, to be honest, of my house, you know? Um, because that's my daughter. She's scared of me.
Okay. Girl, that's life. That's life. That's what
Uh-huh.
happens.
So I it took me a while to see how much I was always kind of shape shifting, role changing. I was never one version of myself. I was one version at school, one version with my parents, one version with my sister, one version over here. And it was very confusing growing up like that because I never knew which version I was. It was like I had all these different personalities with different people because it's like that's how I created safety, I guess, as a child and as a young teen was to shapeshift for people, you know?
Yeah. Oh, no, I think so many of us do that, right? Depending on who we're hanging out with, depending on the vibe, depending on, you know, yeah, just a bunch of things. I mean, I know I probably definitely like the core of me never changed, right? But as far as the things that I would talk about or whatever, they definitely changed, or how loud I was, or because
Yes.
nobody would ever accuse me of being a wallflower. But just, yeah, it was definitely based on who you're hanging out with, and um you watch your P's and Q's a little bit more with certain people. um Maybe when you're with certain group you curse a little more, you're a little bit more, like
Totally.
all of those things come into play, and I'm sure so many people can relate to that. At what point though, like going through and thinking you're the darkness, did you go through all of school, or did you start seeing like, or did you ever have like a teacher or a mentor or anybody say like, girl, you are so much more than what you're sharing, or like when did those feelings kind of start to change towards yourself?
To be honest, it was when I realized like okay, so when I became pregnant, I was 25. I had my daughter at 25. And it was a big moment of realization for me because that's when I realized that like I had been in the darkness for so long that I mean, during up, I think up to when I was 25, I made a lot of very poor decisions, but at the same time, it was like necessary for my growth. You know, I think when you believe you're bad, I there was a lot of people who saw the good in me, and I'm so grateful for that because I could have gone down a completely different path and been like really negative and really in a bad way. But I think a lot of people saw the light in me, including like one of my first boyfriends who like believed in me enough to say that I deserved to go to university because I wasn't going to go to university. Like I wasn't. But this person was like, "You're good enough to go to university. Why are you not applying?" And I was like, "Really?" And like I remember this human like going to the library with me, studying with me, trying to get me to like love what I did. And because of him, I got through university. You know what I mean? And like I had
Yeah.
so many angels along the way that did believe in me and did see the good in me when I couldn't see the good in me. But ultimately, until I didn't see the good in me, nothing was ever going to change. Nothing. And I think so I never found out the sex of my daughter. I literally found out when they put her on top of my chest and they said it was a girl. And I was sure it was going to be a boy. And it was in that moment that everything clicked for me. And I said, how am I going to raise a daughter when I hate being a woman in this world? That's literally what I thought. I'm like, God, why would you do this to me? Like,
That is so heartbreaking.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Um, Before we go on, I kind of just want to go back really quick, because
yeah,
we're talking about the light and the dark and all of these emotions.
mm-hmm,
You talked about your parents being deported back to
yes,
Colombia from Canada. How old were
yes.
you when that happened?
I was around like 10 or 11 years old when that happened. Yeah.
So how does that affect you? You already think you're the darkness, so to you already think you're the darkness. You're moving to some place completely different than where you grew up, where you started growing up, your first 7 years of life. Um, and that's the great white north, right? And I think so many people think of Canada as everybody there is friendly, everybody there, like, oh, we want to welcome immigrants, I've not, like, this is the first deportation from Canada story that I'm hearing, so I'm extra interested. um so how does that happen, and what kind of effect did that have on you at that age? Because it's taken you probably, you're probably just at the point where you're finally feeling settled, and then something like this happens.
I mean, 100%. It was a very traumatizing experience, to be honest. Like, at a systemic level, we're dealing with, the discrimination of being an immigrant and the way we were treated in the process. It felt very like we were criminals. Unfortunately, like, I mean, I can go a little bit into the story, but it was like we had just gone back to buy groceries. It was like a weekend. And usually the weekends we go to buy groceries. My dad, we were in his car, all of us. It was me, my little sister, my baby sister that was about 6 months old at the time, or 9 months around. I can't really remember. My parents were up in the front. We got stopped by the police at a random routine stop. They checked his license. They said, there's a notice for your deportation. My father's like, no. We basically said, you have no time. Like, we need to get you out now. Like, so apparently, because we had moved from Montreal to Toronto, something had happened with not getting the notice of deportation, from what I remember speaking to my parents about. And so we never got it. And so we were living in Toronto now from Montreal. And basically, usually get notice enough to leave the country. But at that point, they confiscated our car full of groceries. They took us in right away. They put us in the back of the police car, and they took us into the station to then be taken into what's called, like, I guess, a halfway house, a place where, like, they hold you, like an asylum place, right? Until they let you know what they're gonna do with you. And it's really, I mean, they put my parents in handcuffs. You know what I mean? Like, it was very traumatizing to
I
see.
can't imagine how,
And
being that
yeah,
young,
yeah.
and seeing this. Wine break. Time to refill that glass and come back for more wine and chisme. What was it, or why? What was the reason for deportation? Do you mind if I ask?
They didn't accept our claim. They didn't accept our claim. So, because we came in as refugees, and I think there was something that the lawyer had done wrong. I think my parents had a bad lawyer at the time that didn't do a good job with our process. And so we were lucky though, because we had a 10-year visa to the US. So we had a choice to go back to the US and reapply. They said you can still reapply. If you leave now, you can still reapply to come back. So they gave
Oh,
us a choice to go back to Colombia or to go back to the US. And we actually stayed in a house that's called Viva la Casa in Buffalo, which is a halfway house for immigrants who are waiting on their status for either Canada or the US. Yeah.
wow, that's amazing. We need to hear of more places like that that can, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, but that I can only imagine. And then right now, as somebody who's from the outside in, seeing what's happening here in the US, right? For us, it's, oh girl, it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's traumatizing as an adult. I cannot even
Mm-hmm.
imagine as a kid. What do you think? Because I always feel like those types of things impress upon us something, right? I mean, obviously for
Oh,
everybody it's going to be different. What was it that it impressed upon you that you think, like, you look back now and you're like, that was the beginning of whatever for me.
you know, I think that was the beginning of where I knew I couldn't trust authority. And that created a very dangerous suppression in me, because that meant that if authority was dangerous, if the police that was meant to protect me, I took in as a dangerous thing, later on in life, when I was in very traumatic, abusive relationships, I would not have called the police.
Mhm.
I didn't. In moments where I could have used the police's help, I didn't because I didn't trust them. And even now, till this day, I see a cop car beside me if I'm driving or if I'm on the street, and I still, now less because I have confronted this, but before it was a lot more prominent where it was like,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
and
totally.
yeah, like it creates, because the things that are supposed to help you in that, at that young age, I took it as like that's not safe, so therefore I cannot trust it.
No, I mean, those very first interactions that you have with authority, I think make it's so important because it does make such a big impression, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
for me, like our, and I feel like I don't understand why this has changed so much, but where I grew up in North County, San Diego, like the police officers were always at the school for something, not in like to do stranger danger, mad, bike rodeos to teach you about bike safety and getting your
Mm-hmm.
certificate and doing all of this. And my softball coaches were cops. And so I had such a very different early experience with authority. But it's really, and then it's interesting how that changed when I got older in regards
Mm-hmm.
to, well, I'm not a little kid anymore, right? So as a woman, my experiences with police have been very different than they were as a young person. So it's always so interesting to hear like how that happens and everything. When you were going through, did you end up going to school, university in Canada, or did you go? Yeah.
Yeah,
What
in
did you
Canada.
study when you went to the university? When you went to university?
I studied political science. I studied political science, and it was,
That's right, you said
I
that.
yeah, yeah. I became very obsessed with it because I thought, funny enough, I'm like, I would be a great lawyer. Like I thought I'm gonna fight the system, and I'm gonna work either in government or go to law school and fight the system. But it's funny because I started doing an internship in government here in Canada. And to be honest, like I felt at one point, I'm like, this is gonna ask me to sell my soul. I literally thought that. I'm like, if I choose to say yes to working in government, I'm going to have to sell my soul. And that was a moment where my darkness was like, are we wanting to step this deep into darkness? And it was like, no, no. Especially being Latina in a very predominantly white space, women were very catty towards each other. You either were a, you know, or you would have to sleep your way up ultimately. And I saw a lot of it. And I was
Really?
like, you know what? I'd rather not go in this direction. Like
I
I
feel
watched enough
like,
soap operas in my age to know what
yeah,
happened.
I feel like here on the local level, because I used to be the director of communications for a local council for a San Diego City Council member.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's a lot of people who really want to do good when it comes to a local and even county level. I think as soon as you start representing more people, look, and I do know, like, I am involved with the Hope Latinas organization, and Hope stands for Hispanas Organized for Political Equality.
Mm-hmm.
So I am a graduate of the Hope system. Which means like I have met a lot of particular men and women um who are in very like positions of power here in California. Um and the one thing that I will say is when you talk to them, often uh some you're like, I'm not getting the best vibes from you, right? But I think there are more people who really want to do good and who really want to fight. And unfortunately, the system makes it very hard, right? It makes it very hard to fight. Because then when you have and money in politics makes it
Yeah.
very part. I mean, that's the hugest thing because you have these millionaires, billionaires who are like, I will fund you if you do this for me. And it makes it very hard, I would imagine. I'm not somebody who ever has a desire to run for office.
Yeah.
I will be the back, like I will help. I will be the back person, but like as far as jumping in there, I do not want to be that person. Um, what was it for you that what was like, was there one particular thing or was it the overarching thing? And then what did you decide to pivot to after that?
Well, the thing is, like, I've been a rebellious spirit, like I said, my whole life. And I'm really good. And I realize that now that I'm looking back, how many times I've looked at systems that were broken and called them out. Like, I could see it. And I didn't know how I could see it because I wasn't an expert in it. But I just knew that I was like, this system is broken. And the thing about broken systems is that you can have all the good intentions in the world to fix it. But if you're working within the system, me personally, you will get sucked up in it.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what good heart you have, no matter what good intentions you have, the system has been set in place for millennia so that they work and you're just like a cog in the wheel
Yeah,
or
that's
whatever,
exactly
you
what I
know?
was thinking, the exact phrase I was thinking.
So, so I'm like, I know I can run with this. Like I knew that I had it in me to be someone that could grow there. And it would be easy because I was already used to my darkness. At this point, I was in my 20s, 22, 23. I was like, oh, I can play this game. I can play this game. But my heart that was so wise and smart said, we are not meant to play this game because you're meant like there's always been an underlying little voice inside of me that has gotten stronger and stronger over time that said you are so much more than this, you know. And
Yeah.
it's that voice that took me out of that and said no, this is not where you want to be. And honestly, it became very clear that I am going to be a system changer, but not from inside the system. Not from inside the system. I don't want to
So
play
where
that game.
so then what you're like, okay, I don't want to play this game. So where do you go from
Mm-hmm.
there?
You become an entrepreneur.
But how do you like here's the thing, right? I call myself an accidental entrepreneur, which I think a lot of people are, right? You see something and you're like, I can't do this anymore. I would rather stay up, work 70 hours a week for myself because let's be
Mm-hmm.
real, Gisela, like being an entrepreneur is not always, rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah,
It's a lot
100%.
of late nights. It's a lot of times, sometimes my husband's sleeping and I remember something and I jump up, go to the living room, pull out my computer, start doing stuff. Is it the most healthy thing? No, but I'm like, if I do not do this right now, it's not going to get done. Right. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different things, always having to be the like the buck ends with you, right? So even when it comes to the podcast, if a podcast does not come out, it's ultimately my fault, right?
Yeah.
If something doesn't, it's ultimately my fault. Nobody else's responsibility but my own. So where do you go? Where you're like, okay, well now I don't want to go into politics. I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. What do you decide? How do you decide that and what you're gonna do?
Well, to be
And
honest,
and
it
what
wasn't
type of
straight.
entrepreneur?
You know, to be honest, my idea after I left politics and I said, you know what, this is not for me. My next bright idea as a 20-year-old is like, I could be a trophy wife.
Why not? Why not?
I said, I think the world is broken. Let it be broken. I'll be a trophy wife. Okay, leave me alone. So
Hey,
what?
in your 20s, there's been times where I've thought that too. And then I'm like, damn it, why did my mom raise me so well? Like when the opportunities are there, I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That's not how I roll. But I'm like, damn, then I'm like, damn it. Why can't I roll like that?
I said, I can be someone's arm candy, and they can just support every whim that I have. You know what I mean? Like, why not? That was my next idea in my 20s. I was like, you know what? Why not? Find my Prince Charming. And that's how you end up pregnant and in a toxic relationship. Lesson learned.
There you go. Now
There you
you have
go.
now you have arm candy for the rest of your life. Now instead of you being the arm candy, you got arm candy. Gotta
Candy. I think gone wrong.
yes, manifestation for sure gone wrong. So you end up like I'm so curious because you go from that to
Mhm.
like, okay, I have this idea. I'm gonna be, some rich man's wife. And then,
Yeah,
but so then how do you get from that to becoming a writer and becoming an entrepreneur? Like, I want it, like, how do you go from that? Because you're still in your 20s. Look, and everybody, I think most of the people that listen to the podcast are beyond their 20s, right? And I think so many of us are like, your 20s, you still get to do stupid stuff. Like, enjoy your 20s. When people are in such a rush, when I see young women like in such a rush to get married and start the rest of their lives in their 20s, I'm like, I promise, like, be stupid. Be stupid in your 20s. Be crazy in your 20s because, you have the rest of your life to find it the rest of your life, right?
totally, totally. 100%. So thank you. I'm not in my 20s though. I'm 34 now. I wish,
No,
but
that's what I'm saying. When you're in your
yeah.
like you were in
Oh
your
yeah.
20s at that time when you're having the idea of being a trophy wife.
God, I was like, I was like brainstorming what's the easiest way that I can just like not have to stress about life. But you know what? For me, it came so after I left and I decided, I went. So I was finishing up school. I did internships. I did some work, and I realized that wasn't the path I wanted to take. I always found that my biggest lessons were in relationship because I found that relationships were really tough for me. And I grew up brainwashed by telenovelas. Like I grew up watching telenovelas like it was freaking the Sunday church. Okay. So unfortunately, my brain was rayado, was like, find a man, he will save you. Find a man, he will save you. Find a man, he will save you. That was like
And then you'll have
literally,
to push some other lady down the stairs.
literally. Totally. And so I found a man that I thought was going to be my person. And, the idea was like, oh my God, I found the guy. He's perfect. We're going to build a life together. Well, life had another plan for me. You know what I mean? And it didn't turn out to be rainbows and butterflies like I thought. And having my daughter was my big wake up call. It was the smack in the face I needed because when you become a mom, I could no longer escape. I could not run away. I could not go into another relationship to forget. I could not take a trip to Cuba or Mexico to like pretend everything's okay. So as a mom, it was like this grounding force that was like, you're here now. What you gonna do about it? You
Yeah.
know? And it was that moment where I saw my child and I'm like, oh my God, I'm raising another woman. And I don't even like being a woman. Like I was jealous of men. I'm like, I wish I was a guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I don't think I've ever wished I was a guy, but there's wish times where I'm like, why do I have to pull down my pants to go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Like every woman. Why can't we just have that too?
I honestly, I've trauma around being a woman. I've seen a lot of abuse in my life. I experienced sexual assault as a young child. Um, so I very much saw the dynamic of the privilege that men got away with, and for a really long time, even as a child, young adult, I thought that being a woman was weakness, was a disadvantage. And so when God gave me a daughter, I said, what am I going to do?
Oh my God. It was his way of saying, you are strong. Like legit, that was God's way of saying, you're not weak. You are
Mm-hmm.
strong. And you are going to lead this little girl into being an amazing woman. Girl, I already know that.
I know, I know. It was like such a beautiful manifestation of like, I always say, like, God has always led my path, and I've always had angels on my path that have steered me in the right direction. And having my daughter was the biggest blessing I could ever ask for because it was the most unexpected way that God said, this is how you're going to start to love yourself. This is how you're going to learn that being a woman is actually a superpower,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Oh,
That's
for sure. So obviously that has a huge effect on you having a daughter. At one point, because when you're talking and helping other women, obviously you're tapping into things that you have gone through and everything. How long was that journey, that guidance? Did you start seeking therapy? Did you start, like, what were the steps that you were like, okay, I need to heal myself? Because really that's what you needed to do. You had to go through
yeah.
a journey of healing in order to be the mom you needed to be for your daughter. So what did that look like for you?
It looked like, well, first it was a big awakening moment. It was like I need to get to know myself better. But obviously I didn't look at myself first. I said, how do I not screw up my child? Right? That's not, instead of saying like how do I fix myself, it was like how do I not screw her up? Right? Because I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I could see all the patterns start to show up in me, all the things that I was already projecting on her. And I was like, no, this cannot be the way. So I started to read a lot of books at first. So I that's where I read about Dr. Shafali, who's a parenting coach. I read about Gabor Mate, who's a therapist and psychologist, who's an um, amazing thinker of our time when it comes to parenting as well. And I realized reading those books that I'm like, oh my God, I was never raised like that. No wonder I have these things. So in parenting her, I was finding so much healing for me.
Mhm.
And I reached a point where, and I'll be honest, there was a point in my relationship before it was over that I thought I was not meant to be a mom. And I was so much in deep depression that I looked at the door all the time and thought I should leave. You know, I thought, I'm not meant to be a mom. I'm going to screw her up.
Oh,
And I was
no.
so depressed. I literally thought, like, yeah, I think she's better off without me. You know, I'll leave her with her dad. I'll be gone. And when I started to have those thoughts, I'm so glad I reached out to a friend who connected me to someone who looked at me and said, you're not depressed. You're depressed. Sorry. You have so much, like, you're just in a system that doesn't support you, you
Mhm.
know? And when she said that, it was like, so I'm not screwed up. I'm just not in a system that supports me. And that allowed me to start therapy, meet people who were entrepreneurs. When she saw me, she's like, I think you're meant to be an entrepreneur. She's like, you're not meant to fit into a box. And I was like, what is
Yeah.
that? Like, I was like, what is that? I don't even know. I thought you have to go to the bank, ask for money, get a brick and mortar business going, and that's how you get a business. You know what I mean? But she's like,
Yeah.
no, the online space is huge. There's so much there, you know? And it was through, again, people seeing the good in me and me realizing that like there is goodness in me that I was able to start that journey back to self-love
Yeah.
for myself. Yeah. And for my daughter.
So I want to, because you were talking about all the trauma that you have had to go through, whether it is as a child, um, at and then seeing your parents, as even as a child being sexually abused, then you're having to see your parents be um deported and going through all of that, and then going thinking like, okay, I'm going to have a boy, and you're in this traumatic relationship, and then the trauma that you had to put yourself through with having a daughter and all of that, that even showed up in your business.
Yeah.
And you did a story about about a time when a client threatened to sue you, but
Mm-hmm.
really it was about their trauma. So I want to talk, like, share a little bit about what you do and how maybe people's traumas show up even when they think they're seeking help, how their traumas could possibly show up in what they're seeking to either help or hinder their progress.
Yes. So I always say that our business is a mirror to our own limits, our own belief systems, our own way that we see the world. So for me, my business from the moment I started, when you go from never being an entrepreneur, never having entrepreneurs in your family that you could see, it's like you're starting from scratch, right? And so you are not sure. So you don't understand why you're not able to call in more money. You don't understand why you're not able to speak on camera. You're like, how do I sell myself? So you have all these questions, right? And what I've realized through time, because I've now been doing this for 7 years, so I'm a business coach. And I have been coaching women in business mostly through marketing and business strategies. But in the past 4.5 years, it's been deeper work because I realized that for women like myself, it was not just a strategy that was going to get me to the next level. I had to understand how I was the biggest block to my own success. And most women are just buying strategy, but they don't understand that actually we are blocking ourselves from the best business that we can have because we have all these assumptions and beliefs that we take with us. It's like a big bag that we carry with us everywhere we go, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, when I had even the type of clients that we attract are a mirror of the lessons that we need to learn. So it was funny because up to that point, I was an overgiver to my clients. And what that meant was I had a very, very strong savior complex that I didn't know I had in the moment. I had this need to save my client. And so this particular client was going through a very toxic, abusive relationship. And it was very messy because he had power financially. She had not worked in a long time. And that didn't trigger me, but it did give me this need to like, I need to save her. I need to make sure she's okay. Right. And it was funny because I thought I was doing amazing work with her, and I really was. I mean, I documented every piece of our work together because I thought it was so beautiful the way she was evolving in front of my eyes. But the thing was that it wasn't my job to save her. It wasn't my job to save her. She had to want to save herself. And I think that me being the boundary pusher that I am, which is part of what I came here to do in this world, when you show another woman her own power and her own freedom, those that don't want her to be free will try to tame it. And that's what happened with this client. She unfortunately was showing up stronger than ever, and her abuser was not liking it. And so they came and attacked me, or tried to anyway,
Yeah.
because I was pushing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was reading the caption for it, I want to just read one thing. You in this, you say that you knew it, that you knew when she asked for a refund, you were like, what? But then you're like, I knew it. And you said, and this is just part of the post. My past trauma had influenced my business decisions, blinding me to all the red flags this client had shown. She needed to save her, my need to save her had clouded my judgment. And then you say, let's see, early on, I found out this client was in a controlling, abusive relationship. My unhealed need to save women had attracted someone who didn't really want saving. She put me on a pedestal and my ego loved it. I tied my worth to her praise and we became codependent, her needing my coaching and my needing her validation. Looking at my other clients, I saw the same pattern. It was exhausting to run a business like this. This was a wake up call and I was ready to face it. I love that because I never thought of it in that way, that our past traumas, that it can attract those people in our business. You think of that in your personal life, right? Like we hear that all the time is what's the common denominator amongst all these people? Maybe it's you, right? We hear that. But when it comes to business, we don't hear that. So when you are working with women and because this is not something I think we've ever talked about. What are those things that you try and clue in on that maybe you didn't before, that that this person is ready, or that maybe this is not the person that's going to work with you? Or what are the first things that you even say to a potential client that is seeking to work with you?
well, first of all, I could say something like there's a difference between saying a boundary and being a boundary, right? There's a big difference. So I could say, I'm not going to work with women who are still with their abusive partners, let's say, right? An example. But my energy is still calling them in because I still have the savior complex. So that's a different thing. I had to work on where was that coming from? Was I ready to let go? Was my ego ready to say, I do not need to be praised for my work in order to know that my work is important and good?
Yeah.
Right. And so what I had to clue in on is, have they taken enough steps on their own for them to ask for help now? Because what happens is, if you get them without them taking any steps towards their own freedom, it's not the right time.
Yeah.
It's not the right time because it is up to the woman to take the steps towards her own freedom out of her own need and desire to get out of whatever bad situation that is, be it a toxic relationship, be it financial hardship, whatever it is. But if I have to go and grab her and hold her hand through it, and she's not willing to dig herself out, I cannot. That's when I say, go to a therapist. You need a therapist. That's
I
when I say
mean,
it. Yeah.
no, absolutely. I like on one of your other ones, you have, I am not a guru. I don't aspire to make you need me. I
Yeah.
refuse to make you depend on me to have access to your greatness.
Yes.
And I think so often, when I think that's you have to go into, if you decide you need some sort of coaching. And here's the thing, like we've had other coaches on before. And the thing is you have to figure out who is good for you, right?
Yes.
Like not everybody is going to vibe in the same way. That not everybody, some people have like hyper focus on different things. Some, and so to be able to say, look, like you have greatness in you. I want to help you tap into that, but you cannot, like, but if you don't do the work, I can't do it for you. So you can't
Yes.
depend on me to access your greatness. You need to be prepared to do that on your own.
100%. It's being very transparent. Being very
Thank you.
transparent.
Thank you. I'm done with my TED talk.
100%. 100%. But that comes with the transparency that you hold yourself to. So when I was seeking praise, when I was seeking validation from my clients, I was attracting those clients. But when I started to validate my own work through my own ability to see the transformation I was having on people without them needing to validate it in me, I started to attract a different caliber of people that would take action, that would not wait for me to hold their hand, that would say, oh my God, this clicked, I'm going to run with this.
What has been for you? Because obviously you use so much of your story to be able to, I would assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the women that maybe you attract or want to attract or whatever maybe have probably gone through very similar things, and they maybe thought they were the darkness. That's what I'm guessing, as far
Yeah.
as the women that are mostly that, like the women that thought they were the darkness, and you're like, no, you are the light. You're not the darkness. You're the disruptor. What was it like? What was your lowest point that you were just, that you literally were like, I cannot do this. I am not alone. Because you've said that there was times where you thought you wanted to walk away from your daughter even. I can't,
Mm-hmm.
I personally have never birthed any children, so I don't know. I don't want to lie and say, oh, I understand what that feels like. I have no clue what that feels like. But what was that lowest point for you? And what was the catalyst that you're like, no, I can't embrace this. I can't embrace the darkest of the dark. And now I need to change. Something needs to change.
So for me, I mean, there's been many moments, many little moments, but I think if I'm thinking of one that really stood out for me was when I was going through the separation with my ex. He actually took me to court to take full custody. Full custody. He wanted, so I got served on a random Tuesday, not expecting to be served because I thought we had managed an agreement of share custody and blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, I get served with papers where I am called the worst thing possible. And he calls me out on so many things that were hidden shadows of me. So I had a mirror in that moment, and I call him a master because he was a teacher in my life that came to teach me something. And I'm grateful for this lesson now. But back then I was not. Back then I was in a lot of pain. And he called out in a very amplified, worst case scenario way all my most toxic traits on this document, saying why I should not be a mother. Okay. And in that moment, seeing those things written about me, that most of them were lies. Just like, when you take a little truth and you make it bigger,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like that. And
That's
when
my
I saw
husband's
that,
world. He makes exaggerates everything.
so it was like every little shadow that was already hurting me inside, he exaggerated. And to be seeing that written in paper form, telling me that I had to show up to court to fight now and prove that I'm not a bad mom. When I saw that, and I saw this moment in time where it's like, you are going to have to prove to yourself, you can believe these lies that are going to be told about you, or you're going to prove to yourself that you are not this person and you're going to show up for yourself. And that's when I knew that people around me now wanted to see that darkness in me come out because they've seen it before and they wanted to use it against me. And I said, mm-mm, you will not take my darkness and use it against me. No one's allowed to do that with me. And that's when I decided that I was going to transmute all that darkness into something more powerful. And that's when I realized that I could turn it into light, that I could turn it into complete self-acceptance and complete, like, strength, like just such, and grace. Grace is what I turned all that darkness into. That's when I knew that it could not be used against me anymore.
I think like I feel like your trauma has just really informed your life.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the where I need to grow. And one thing that you shared was that we need to stop building a trauma-based businesses and build holistically embodied businesses.
Yeah.
What is the difference? Share, like, what do you like? What would, why do you think people are building trauma-based businesses, and how do you transform that into a holistic business? Or what do you like, share what you mean by that and how you can go from one to that to the other?
I love this question. It's one of my favorite questions to explain because, so if you see the way business is built now and has been built for a really long time, it means that in this capitalist system that we build businesses in, it's very much a hierarchy. We want to get to the top, and the top takes over, right? We want to take over an industry. That's why we have Amazon. That's why we have Apple. That's why we have Target and Walmart, and we have all these big, big, strong companies that just want to take over an industry. And the problem with that is that the people behind the brands, that if we go just to the person, if we look at the Elon Musk, the Jeff Bezos, the Mark Zuckerberg, these are humans with deep wounds inside who, through business, have thought that could create the change, the power, the safety that they wanted to see in the world. But what they have created is little monsters, little rebellious children inside of them with a lot of money doing whatever the beef they want.
You
And
can
that is
cuss
hurting
whatever the
all of
fuck
us.
they want.
Okay, good. And this is the problem. Like, if we keep allowing our trauma to build businesses, it's going to destroy us. It's going to destroy our earth. It's going to destroy our people because it comes from a wounding and we don't see it. But when I look at, when I look at Elon Musk, when I look at Jeff Bezos, when I look at Mark Zuckerberg, I look at their little inner child and I see this wounded little children that didn't get enough love, validation, that they felt rejected, and that somehow they found their way into business and found that to be the way that they validated their manhood, their existence. And that is causing a lot of pain in the world because a lot of us, even if you go to any talk about business, they're like using Jeff Bezos as an example and Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. And I'm like, these are the examples that we're looking up to. You want to be like a megalomaniac that just hogs all the money, all the things because that's how you become successful. Like that's what we're attaining.
Girl, let me tell you, My husband always jokes that he's working until I become the next Joe Rogan. And I was like, I have zero interest in being anything like Joe Rogan. I don't even need that type of money. Like, that is ridiculous, right? Like, I don't even need a quarter of that money. Like, but would I like some more? Absolutely. We're working towards that. But anytime he tells me that, I'm like, because what I associate with him is not anything good.
Yeah.
And so why would I want to be like that person? That's not who I aspire to be. I aspire to be the best version of me that I can be and be able to continue to use this platform to continue to amplify people across communities of color. That's what I want to do. I want to continue to be that and to get better at what I do, be able to be in a position where I truly am able to use this platform even on a larger scale.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that I need to be like I said, when he says that, I know he doesn't mean actually him. I know he doesn't, but I never take that as a compliment because I don't think anything positive when I think of Joe Rogan. I'm not gonna lie.
Because we don't really have good examples of people that are doing good work in the world, that are living sustainably, that are not trying to make millions and millions and billions of dollars because apparently that's what we need to be happy. Like, that's not what we need, right? But that's what we've been sold as success. And so that's where so if we don't heal this trauma inside of us, we will keep reaching to fill this endless little hole inside of us with more money. How do I take over this? How do I become the best at that? How do I? Instead, what I've realized, because that's the way I was taught about business, be the best, take over the industry, right? Build your empire. We're all trying to build empires. How do you build empires? Through colonization. Do I want to colonize? I don't think so. That's not who I want to be.
Wait,
So, so why are we building empires? I say let's build communities.
I agree with that.
Because to be honest, with what you do, with what I do, if I serve a community well, we all make more than enough, and we will all have more than enough. But we need to know what that actually looks like for us from a healed place, not from our wounding, not from our pain. That's the difference. And that's where holistically embodied business came from, is how do we look at these traumas that are being reflected from your business and work towards healing, because it's a lifelong process, but at least being aware enough of how your trauma is helping you strategize about your business, show up online, what ways you're being of service that is actually hurting versus growing you. And looking at these things and saying, okay, well, what would it look like if I did it differently? If I did it from an embodied place, from a place of full acceptance and radical self-love, what would your business look like from that place?
Girl, that's correct. No, that's such a good, like, I don't think I've ever thought of it in that way, and you're so right of how we are taught to approach business. And then when you said, why are we building empires? Because empires I was like, oh shit, yes, you're so right. But I don't ever say that. I always say, like, yes, I'm building my community. But I think that's just part of the things that I've always been part of. We've always said we're building our community. And I never thought of it in that way. Girl, you just like helped me like think of it in that way just to make sure I continue to think of it in that way.
And I gotta say that this work is not just thanks to me, it's thanks to the decolonization work that I've been learning about too. Because it's about, I think it's about going back to indigenous ways of existence. And I think it's about learning from the wisdom that has always been there, that we have been like taken away from.
Mm-hmm.
And this ability for me to see business this way has been through my own insight and my own ability to see the system as really flawed, but then seeing and educating myself through decolonization work and people who are experts in that field and learning from them and seeing how if we don't learn to do better, even though we're women of color, we've internalized colonizer lingo, colonizer ways of life, colonizers ways of existing, you know?
Ooh, that cuts deep because it's so true. Because
It's
if that's all you've
true.
learned, right? Um, and maybe and even if you haven't learned of other ways or you haven't heard of other ways, you can't learn if you haven't heard, then
Totally.
that becomes part of your lingo as well. And I think that's why we see um especially among the Latino community, right? We see so many people embracing the Cheeto in charge. I do not use his name because I think that he is doing irreparable damage to the United States. You're not in the United States, but he wants Canada to be the 51st state.
And I heard like this man is on another level. Another,
I don't know what drugs he is taking, but
you should
if
share it with
we
all of us.
yeah, yes. I mean, here's the thing. It's always and we hear it all the time like if I had that much audacity, how like we need to get that much I know I'm saying we need to and I say that with my full chest knowing that I don't have that kind of audacity. um what like if somebody wants to work with girl, I can't believe it's already been over an hour. It flies by. If somebody wants to work with you, how can they do that?
Find most of my work on www.giselaholguin.com. You will find my body of work there. You will find a lot of my thought leadership around self healing, about business, about being more trauma informed, a lot of working with your inner shadow and the darkness that exists inside of you. So you will find a lot of my products there. And you can find me online as well on Instagram and as Gisela Holguin as well. Yeah.
If there is, we kind of touched on a lot of things. So if there's anything else that we did not touch on, or if there's anything that you want to share, please do that now.
I mean, there is a book in the process of being written right now. It is my goal in 2025 to start sharing my wisdom in a book. Um, I have been gifted the ability to be a really good writer, and I find that my writing is one of my most powerful tools of communication. And I really want to paint a new world through my book of what is possible for all of us through our business, through our healing, through community. And that's what I want this book to be about, to lead you back to yourself and to your inner home, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've been through.
Girl, it is. I'm glad we got to talk before. I'm so glad we got to, um, finish the conversation where the it's a lot where it wasn't so heavy, where the emotions
Yeah,
weren't so heavy. So I
totally.
appreciate you so much. Mi gente, all of the information will be in the show notes from Gisela's website, social media, all of that. And until next time. Hola, mi gente. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. If you would like to hear more wine and more chisme, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Saludos.